We had what we call the Vision 2020, but I guess it was aborted at some point, and Page came later, and now the NDP. We're now trying to find out how to consolidate the gains within the NDP. And a country without a plan is bound to fail, but plans are as good as the implementation and the monitoring and the evaluation of these plans. So the NDP, we have people from diverse backgrounds on this panel who will be giving their take on the NDP. And I'll start with Mr. Malik Khan. Malik, as we all know, is a Gambian in the diaspora with a company called Point Click, and he is now a household name in the Gambia. So without further ado, I'll go to the introduction of Mr. Malik Khan. Malik Khan is the founder CEO of Point Click Technologies. He is a seasoned information systems technology executive with over 20 years of experience in the IT managed services, cloud hosting, and consulting services. Equally, he is also serving customers worldwide in various sectors. Mr. Khan started Point Click in 2007 to focus on end-to-end cloud management, IT, that spans beyond infrastructure management. Today, his company has grown with offices in 4 countries: USA, India, Spain, and the Gambia. The company serves well-known brands and organizations in the US, such as the NFL, the National Football League, also Trader.com, Under Armour, which is a big company that services the NFL and other sports apparel needers within the US market, Enterprise, American Red Cross, and more. Malik resides in Durham, North Carolina with his wife of 18 years, a 15-year-old son, and 2 beautiful daughters, aged 10 and 9. Malik is an occasional speaker at industry trade shows such as Microsoft Worldwide Partner Conference /Inspire, Microsoft Hosting Summit, and DNN Software Conference. Colleagues describe him as a progressive, driven, down-to-earth information technology expert who can be relied on to offer superior solutions that deliver profitable results on time and on the budget. Malik, welcome. Next to Malik, we have Patricia Lamour. Patricia Lamour, MBE, is the co-founder and CEO of Inspire Education Group of the GIDA Network and Consultancy. GIDA is Gender Education and Enterprise Development for Africa. Aspire is a UK-registered independent learning and apprenticeship training provider that acts locally and advises globally, designing solutions to plug the excellence and equity gaps. An alumni of the world-renowned Institute of Education, UCL, Patricia brings a wealth of insight, technical knowledge, networks, and expertise in education, gender equality, and enterprise to all her initiatives which change children, empower women, inspire leadership, and transform lives. Patricia is a former head teacher of a top international school in the Gambia and advisor to Ofqual, the national exam regulator in the UK. From helping to establish Black History Month in the UK in the 80s, to advising the EU Young Black Business Awards and students regards future-proofing for the 4th Industrial Revolution. Patricia brings decades of integrity, institutional memory, and creativity in working with others to find solutions to global challenges. Her group has successfully won several Erasmus Plus strategic partnerships for innovation to benefit migrant women and families in Europe, and together with expert associates and partners, she promotes and advises on the development of education for wealth strategies for Africa. Patricia has co-organized and presented at high-level roundtables at the Houses of Parliament, number 10 Downing Street, the education panel and workshop of the Bundung Conference, Nairobi, Kenya, which Patricia organizes and chaired, was described by the director of UNESCO for East Africa as phenomenal. Patricia received the African Achievers Award at the House of Commons in England as a role model for girls' education and was honored by the Queen with an MBE for her services to diversity in 2017. Congratulations, Patricia. Next, we have a distinguished gentleman, Mr. Mohammed M. Jagana. I think he doesn't need an introduction. He's a household name in the Gambia. But Mr. Mohammed M. Jagana studied as a chartered accountant in the United Kingdom and qualified in 1995 with an ACCA. He joined his family business back in the Gambia before starting his entrepreneurial career. He has been involved in several startups in Africa as an entrepreneur with over 15 years of experience in financial services and biometric technology. He has a wide experience in the financial sector with strong governance and leadership skills. In 2002, he was founding shareholder of Pristine Consulting. In 2005, he and his business partner started J Financial Services Limited in the Gambia. In 2006, he was part of a consortium of Gambian entrepreneurs to start up an SPV, Gambia Investment Group, to acquire a stake and set up EcoBank Gambia affiliate. In 2013, Mr. Jagana was appointed as a board member of EcoBank. He is also involved as director in Volo Africa since 2011. Volo Africa, a leading biometric and software integration company with experience in financial and healthcare sector. In August 2017, he was appointed as board member of the Gambia Ports Authority. In 2012, he was elected president of the Gambia Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Before that, he served in various capacities as a board member since 2003. Mr. Jagana has extensive knowledge of diplomatic and cross-border challenges in West Africa from his experience as the current president of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry and former president of FOPAO, F-O-P-A-O. He has great interpersonal skills with ability to relate to persons from diverse backgrounds and cultures. He also serves in various non-profit organizations and local charities and is an active member of the Rotary of Fajara. Past president 2008-2009. In May 2018, he was appointed as the chairman Gambia National Olympic Committee and the Marketing Committee. Mr. Jagana, you're welcome. Last but not least, we have Mr. Alaji Fadera. Mr. Alaji Fadera holds a master's degree in international development, management, and economics from the University of Manchester and International Islamic University, Malaysia, respectively. He also holds a bachelor's degree in economics and management and a higher teacher certificate. Mr. Fadera is currently the Director of Development Planning at the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs, a position he has held since 2011. As Director of Development Planning, Mr. Fadera leads and coordinates the formulation, development, review, analysis, and monitoring and evaluation of the NDP or NDPs. He also works with partners to ensure sectoral and regional plans and policies are in line with the NDPs. He recently coordinated the formulation of Gambia's National Development Plan 2018-2021, international advocacy, and recently concluded international conference for the Gambia. Before becoming Director of Development Planning, Mr. Ferreira worked as Economic Policy Specialist at the defunct National Planning Commission, NPC, as Principal Economist at the Ministry of Economic Planning and Industrial Development, MEPID, He also worked as a lecturer in economics at the University of the Gambia and as a teacher in different secondary schools across the country. Mr. Federa is a member of many committees and task forces. Mr. Federa, you're welcome. Like I said, I think the stage has been set, and we want to talk about consolidating the gains for the implementation of the NDP, our National Development Plan, 2018-2021. So, housekeeping, I'll give each panelist time to deliberate on their subject matter, and I'll start with Mr. Alaji Federa. And Mr. Federa's presentation will be implementation of the National Development Plan 2018-2021. Where are we now? We would like you to give an update on the implementation of the NDP, including achievements to date, challenges faced, and the way forward, especially in the stakeholder groups. The floor is yours.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Nyang, CEO of Africa Global, distinguished participants, members of the private sector, civil society organizations, and my colleagues from the public sector. We are pleased once again to be here this year, TAFCON 2018. We were here last year. I think this has provided a very good platform for public, private sector, as well as civil society dialogue on key issues affecting our country. As from the onset, I think we would all agree that to develop this country, we need all hands on deck. It's not just the government. Government plays a facilitating and an enabling role, but the private sector as well as civil society are key if we're going to achieve the development objectives that we have set for ourselves. And I think this is well articulated in the National Development Plan. Where are we in terms of implementation? First, whatever we're going to say here will be preliminary, because as part of the National Development Plan, we have made provision for an annual progress report of the National Development Plan, and we intend to embark on that very early in 2019 so that we will do a comprehensive stock-taking exercise as to the implementation of the National Development Plan, what has worked, what the challenges are, and how do we need to work together as a country, including all of us, to at least address those challenges. By way of background, we know that the National Development Plan was launched in February 2018. When we were here the last time, then we were just finalizing the formulation. Following its launching, we felt it is very important, since it will require resources, to do something to mobilize resources for its implementation. But as part of the formulation process, we know we tried as much as possible to make this as consultative as possible. For the first time in the history of the Gambia, especially for some of us who are relatively young, we had consultations across the length and breadth of this country, in each and every district, and in the wards in the greater Banjul area. We had series of technical as well as policy level consultations. Thematic working groups were set up around so many issues, including education, energy, macroeconomic management, and a host of others. There were consultations with the civil society organizations, the private sector, as well as our development partners, both resident and non-resident. This led to the finalization of the National Development Plan and its subsequent launching. And we don't have to go into the details as to what the vision of the National Development Plan is, because most of us have already extensively read or gone through this National Development Plan. But by way of goal, we are committing ourselves to delivering good governance and accountability, social cohesion, and national reconciliation, and a revitalized and transformed economy for the well-being of all Gambians. So it is really very big task that we're setting ourselves. And if I say ourselves again, we want to emphasize that this goes beyond government alone. It's all of us, because we can't develop this country with government alone. Government has to make sure that it effectively partners and creates that space for the private sector and civil society to participate. When we costed the National Development Plan, the overall cost stood at around $2.4 billion. When we did the assessment of resources that are already available, both local as well as ongoing projects, we had a financing gap of $1.6 billion. We developed a financing strategy. Because again, we say government alone cannot finance this. We have to work with development partners. We have to work with the private sector as well as civil society organizations. And we came up with about 42 flagship projects, ranging from governance, going to infrastructure, energy, issues relating to youth, women, agriculture, fisheries, and a host of other areas. And these were the flagship projects that were presented at an international conference in Brussels that was held in May. But as built up to the international conference, we felt at the international conference it's mainly institutions, development partners coming and pledging the amount of resources they want to make available, both financial as well as both financial and technical. So you have to make sure that you do a lot of groundwork before then to make sure that they are adequately sensitized about the contents of the National Development Plan. And as such, government embarked on a series of advocacy meetings with our partners. We know that many of our partners are not necessarily resident in the Gambia. Most of them are resident in Dakar, but covering the Gambia. So the first port of call, I think barely a week after the launching of the National Development Plan, was in Dakar to meet some of these partners. Also had tours of some European capitals, including the EU headquarters in Brussels, to have one-on-one with different countries, but also have very good discussions with the decision-making bodies of the EU. We also reached out to some of our partners in North America, including the Bretton Woods Institution, but also most importantly, the United Nations at its headquarters, where the Minister of Finance presented the National Development Plan to the United Nations, including the Peace Building and Support Operations Office. The objectives, like I said, was to adequately sensitize our partners ahead of the international conference so that they will be able to know what the thrust of the National Development Plan is and what the resource requirements are and the various priority areas and the flagships ahead of the international conference. On May 22nd and 23rd, the international conference for the Gambia was held in Brussels with the support of several partners, including the EU, but we also work very closely with the UNCT, that's the United Nations country team in the country, as well as with some partners like the World Bank, the IMF, the African Development Bank. 2 days. The first day was the pledging session. That was the international conference itself. And the second day was devoted to a private sector forum so that we'll be able to discuss investment opportunities in the Gambia for the private sector, but also within the context of the National Development Plan. And again, in terms of the international conference, it was made as inclusive as possible. So we had representatives from the private sector, and the president participated on behalf of the Gambia Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We had several heads of private sector organizations who also participated. We also had civil society present at the international conference. Luckily, the international conference was able to mobilize significant amount of resources in the form of pledges, about $1.7 billion. And again, we always want to emphasize these are pledges. That means a lot of work needs to be done to make sure that these pledges materialize into commitment. And that has been the trust of the Ministry of Finance and the government as a whole to make sure that we try as much as possible to get these pledges materialized into commitments. Before I come to how far we have gone as far as these resources are concerned, it will be important that we
look at we also reach out to stakeholders in country, both at the regional level as well as at the national level, to share the contents of the National Development Plan. Following the international conference, we have stepped up the follow-ups with some of our partners, and bulk of the resources on the bilateral front are mainly grants. That's about $75.53 million. And as we speak, about 92% of these are committed in various areas as far as the National Development Plan is concerned. We also have the multilateral pledges, which are a combination of grants as well as loans. There's about $1.5 billion. And as we speak, significant amount of these resources, about 50%, has also been pledged to various intervention areas. So as we speak, several interventions are already underway in the area of governance. We are seeing the Constitutional Review Commission starting its work. We are seeing the Truth, Reconciliation, and Reparations Commission also starting to do its work. In the area of energy, we're seeing the Electricity Restoration and Modernization Project taking off the ground, and we're seeing significant investments in the area of technical vocational education and training, as well as youth empowerment, and we've already started finalizing projects in the area of agriculture, which are underway. In terms of some of the challenges that we really need to work on and enhance is the issue of multi-stakeholder involvement in the implementation. And recently we have established a multi-stakeholder platform that includes private sector as well as civil society to also enhance communication of the National Development Plan and its implementation, and to continuously build capacity. And as we speak, we have undertaken several capacity building initiatives around project planning, results-based management, and also a comprehensive review of the monitoring and evaluation framework with a view to making sure that we position ourselves to embark on the comprehensive annual progress report for 2018, which will be done in the first quarter of 2019.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. I think we're doing a great job managing our deficit, and we're now at zero in terms of time, so thank you. Mr. President, you're next, and I think yours will be on the issue of affordable housing. So the floor is yours, and you have 11 minutes to deliberate or give us your presentation.
Thanks, Nyang, but I think it's on creating a more business-friendly Gambia. I like to start with a story. I've learned something from Mustafa Jai. It's always to break the ice with a good story. So I'm learning, my friend, okay? I'll catch up with you before the fourth quarter. In London in 1599, a group of merchants came together to discuss ways to expand their business, promote their trade activities, in which it may please the Lord to prosper. They were interested in trading in sugar, tea, spices, and silk. To enable them to strengthen their business and expand their trading activities, and to ease their doing business, the group approached one of the most powerful women at that time. The woman happened to be Queen Elizabeth I, and the company was East India Company, who received a royal charter on the 31st of December 1600. The company benefited from imperial patronage and soon expanded its commercial activities and trading operations. At the peak of their trading, East India Company was the biggest company in the world. This was achieved because their government, through Queen Elizabeth, made it easy for the merchants to do business. Ladies and gentlemen, this leads me to the question: how do we create a more business-friendly Gambia for Gambian entrepreneurs and merchants? Globally, the World Bank Doing Business ranking is used as a standard benchmark to measure how well countries are doing to make it easier for businesses to operate. To showcase Gambia and how Gambia has been doing, I will look at our overall rankings compared to our immediate neighbors in ECOWAS over the last 10 years. I know people talk about Mauritius and Rwanda, but I want to choose Gambia, Senegal, Guinea-Bissau, and Mali. Because any of us here can go into a gele-gele, get into a van, jump into a plane, and reach these countries within 10 hours. Rwanda might be a little bit longer. So I like to compare with apples with apples. In this new paradigm shift of countries competing for global FDI in the global village, the ease of doing business should be a top priority for any country that wants to create jobs, develop local content, expand government revenue streams, and attract digital entrepreneurs. Because today, digital entrepreneurs, they don't know barriers. The only barrier they know is hindrance. If you put on hindrance, they'll move. Ladies and gentlemen, the ease of doing business rankings are detailed, although they have a very summarized versions that you can access. For example, in 2019, Gambia was ranked 149 out of 190 countries. This is not too far behind our neighbors, Senegal at 141, Mali at 145, but we are well ahead of Guinea-Bissau at 175. So the Gambia, despite our challenges over the last 2 decades, and despite our size, we are in a strong position to launch ourselves to be competitive in the global market. How we do it, let's talk about it. But before we get into that, and for businesses to take on this challenge, maybe we need to go back, since we are part of the Commonwealth, we need to take out a leaf from the East India Corporation and ask Queen Elizabeth to give us a royal charter. But on a more serious note, from our government, I think government needs to ease the part of businesses, both internally and externally. We have seen all over the world where governments carry their businesses to a global platform and support them locally. And I think it's time for Gambia government to look at it. Not look at what Gambian businesses are doing here, but what Gambian businesses can do beyond our borders. TAF is a great example of that. The World Bank highlights the following key points as areas of reform for any country that wishes to improve your ease of doing business. They include starting a business, dealing with construction permits, getting electricity, which is a challenge in Gambia, registering a property, getting credit, paying taxes, trading across borders, enforcing contracts, resolving insolvencies, and protecting minority investors. I would like you to now listen. I know half of you were asleep for about the first 4 minutes of my conversation, but the statistics are very interesting. So in 2010, Gambia was ranked overall 146 out of 190. So we are at the 4th quarter of the table. In 2019, we ranked overall 149 out of 190. Senegal was ranked 152 below out of 190. And in 2019, they ranked 141. Is my mic off? Oh, sorry. In 2010, Mali was ranked 153, and in 2019 they ranked 175. That is in the overall ranking. In terms of starting a business, this is the interesting dynamics here. In 2010, Gambia was ranked 115 out of 190 countries. In 2019, unfortunately, we ranked at 169 out of 190 countries. Most of us have this psychological belief that Senegal is difficult to do business. In 2010, Senegal was ranked 101 out of 190 countries. In 2019, Senegal is ranked at 64. 64. They are heading towards the 4th quarter, going back to childhood days that Taf mentioned earlier in his speech. And I think these are some of the things that we really need to look at. So now, my next point is, the blueprint already exists, and the World Bank highlights the solutions. So what would it take to make the enabling environment more business friendly? What are the types of reforms that are required so that government actors in the private and public sector can play their roles together, create a reform process that would help ease of doing business in Gambia? We have some very low-hanging fruits. We can revamp the single window business registration system. In Dubai, you promise to get your business renewal within 15 minutes. 5, 10, 15. 15 minutes. You promise a pledge from the Dubai government and run by the Dubai Chamber of Commerce to get your business renewal. Digitalized tax payments. Mr. Chernobyl mentioned it. Today, all of us have a smartphone, and Africa has one of the highest penetration of smartphones. But I think to ease doing business, one of the challenges is paying taxes. Why can't we digitalize the payment of taxes? It will be easier for government to collect, it will be easier for the taxpayer to pay, and it would eliminate the middleman. And all of us in this room understand what the middleman consequence means in tax collection. Digitalized government procurement. I think this is something that really can help the government to bring in transparency, good governance, and strengthen local content in national procurement procedures. If they digitalize it, it will allow small, medium-sized businesses to have the opportunity to compete based on a fair, level playing ground. Today, most people do not even understand what government procurement process is because it's cumbersome, kidnapped and captured by a small group. So to expand it and to get younger businesses involved, I think we need to digitalize it. In terms of access to credit, one of the biggest challenges we face in this country is the consent to mortgage, which requires a ministerial signature. I think these are some of the few low-hanging fruits that we can reform quickly so that the ease of doing business would improve. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to leave you with the following statement. The core of the Charter, which settles feudal incidences, that is the rules governing the transfer of landed property, reforming administration of justice, standardizing weights and measures, guarantee the freedom of trade, the free passage of goods and liberties of cities, towns, and ports. These are quotes from the Magna Carta, 1215, some few hundred centuries ago, and they were talking about easing of business. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We have a surplus of time, but I think you've spoken about disruptive technology as a means to really change the environment, the business environment, because the business environment as is been muzzled. And why has it been muzzled? I think there's a sphere of influence that is not rule-based but discretion-based, and that is what's stifling the environment. So bringing in and harnessing disruptive technology may be a way to minimize the intermediation that comes in through discretion and not rules and policy. On that note, we're moving next to Patricia Lamour, and I think she will be talking about investing in Gambia's human capital. I think that will be an interesting talk. We'll listen to what she has to say. And mind you, after all the deliberations, we'll open the floor because we want to hear, it's a feedback process. We want to hear what you think, and what you think matters a lot so that they can give out answers. So Patricia, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you very much for inviting me here, TAFCON. Particularly thank you to Mustafa Njie. Just to let you know, I used to be the principal of Marina International here in the Gambia. I lived here with my children, and my late husband was a senior lecturer at the University of the Gambia and was setting up a new department. So I'm part Gambian in that sense. Also, before I forget, I need to thank some other people who you will know of who have helped me to actually be here and talk to you today about investing in the human capital of the Gambia, which is about education and training in the Gambia. Firstly, my partner here, she was then the executive director of GAIL, Gambia Africa Institute of Leadership, Mrs. Adelaide Sosi, who is a long-time associate and friend of myself. In the UK, I have been working with Dr. Mamadou Salah of Global Hands, and he was he reached the accolade of the most innovative and best teacher in the UK. He was won that award in 2015. And the other person is Dr. Jibril Fall, who I believe has been doing work with the Gambian government here and organizing the diaspora and mobilizing the diaspora, and particularly the UK. So I come and I speak to you here not just as somebody who's just got some ideas, but someone who has been listening and talking to various people, both in the Gambia and outside of the Gambia. We came up with this idea called education, not for poverty reduction, not for quality, but education for wealth. It was an idea that we have been proposing through our partners. We have spoken in Nigeria, we have been to Kenya, but where it started was actually in the Gambia. We came here, our team from Aspire, and we spoke with and we listened to you. We went to ministers, we went to GCTI, Gambia Chamber of Commerce, we spoke with Mr. Njie, we spoke with teachers, we spoke with women, and we spoke and listened to young people. To hear what, for them, what is the kind of education that they want for the Gambia to move forward? And what does wealth actually mean for them? Does it mean the number of billionaires that are in a country? Does it mean the GDP? Does it mean whether you have oil or resources? Or is wealth more about the human capital of the country, the education, the well-being, and the health of its people? Does it mean about the transmission and preservation of its culture through the generations? And does it mean about the sustainable development of its land, its waters, and its industries? So we came with a very holistic view, and we were listening to see what it is that people thought. We then, after we left here, we went and we organized a high-level round table with some of the most brightest minds and loyal hearts in the Gambia that were residing in the UK. And we organized this at the Houses of Parliament. So we captured what we listened to here, we've captured what we've listened to in the UK, and we are putting this together as a final report, Education for Wealth, a roadmap, which we will be launching in February. So us coming back here is actually part of that process to give you a no surprises and a heads up on some of the things that we've found. Right. Now I'm going to say some things that perhaps are not as easy to say. If I had looked at the statistics of where the Gambia were in terms of its debt distress, in terms of the poverty, I probably wouldn't have come up with education for wealth. But because I absolutely believe in the people, particularly in Africa, to solve their own problems, and having lived in the Gambia and seen that the Gambians punch far above their weight in terms of international agencies and institutions and here. I mean, we have an example here, Chernobyl in Rwanda, we have Nyang Njie, who was at the UN, we have Ole Wadadiba, who's at World Bank, we have many Gambians in key positions in United Nations and international agencies. So we know that the capacity is here. But how is the country actually helping to develop all its people? And one of the key things I realized from being the head of Marina International, that the Marina International, the SEBEX, the YS, the Nigerian International Schools, they are not enough for the people. This will only perpetuate an elitist type of institutions. And to develop the whole of the country, we have to look at the basis. One of the things I know in the Gambia, you have done very well in terms of education enrollment of girls. You know, in terms of they are lifted up. But when we see how girls actually are progressing in school and whether they maintain in school, it's a disaster. In terms of the regions, the disparities are huge. So you really must, and the Gambia must continue to focus on the education of girls. I believe this is a priority. Also, another thing that was coming up from speaking with the women, with young people and teachers, is that we need to rebrand the whole notion of education, of teachers. Very few people actually want to be teachers. That's a fact. Yep. We need to rebrand the teaching professions because teachers, when I see how Mrs. Adelaide Saucer is held in such deep regard by people because she was their teacher. And when I speak to young teachers, I spoke to teachers from every single region. They all happened to be in the hotel where I was staying, so it was marvelous. I could actually speak to male and female teachers in all 6 regions. They told me that girls and young do not want to marry teachers. They're not seen as somebody that is, up there. So we need to rebrand the teaching profession in terms of what they represent for the development of the country. They are helping to produce the future leaders, the future business people. Another thing that the young people told me when I spoke to them, they are very wary of foreign interventions. They are wary of gifts that come in from the outside if they do not have the Gambians at heart. And so therefore, they are also watching and waiting and willing to hold accountable anybody in terms of the National Development Plan and in terms of the government. Remember, these young people have grown up under a former authoritarian rule. They are not afraid. And so whatever the National Development Plan does in terms of empowerment of young people, in terms of education, it must be able to harness and speak to young people and harness their dynamism because they are the future. The median age of the Gambian is 17 years. And I'm so happy to hear that, for instance, in TAF's organization, that he is bringing on the young people. Legacy is key. And we, as the elders, I am in the 4th quarter. We, as the elders, we cannot just leave everything to the young people. We must set examples through ethical leadership. We must walk the talk in education, in finance. We owe it to the next generation. And for that reason, Aspire, we've invested to come here to finance the first phase of the Education for Wealth in terms of the consultations that we did here, in terms of the consultations that we did in the UK. And I brought one of my younger leaders here. Brandon, stand up. I brought one of my young leaders here so that he can hold me accountable when I go back. So he can hear what it is we've said. But basically, education is key. Education, 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 and drawing on the endogenous resources of the country, not only from what is coming from outside. And I know I've only got 29 seconds, but I've got to end with an example. And you won't hear it in many of the international organizations because they don't talk about it. Cuba. My parents come from Jamaica. So we're from the Caribbean. Cuba's education and healthcare system is the envy of the world. It spends 12% of its government revenue on education, which is one of the highest in the world. It has celebrated in the last 50 years being 100% literate. In 1961, they embarked on the world's most ambitious literacy program, and in 1 year, they made 1 million Cubans literate. 1 year. No EU money, no foreign money. They mobilized their whole country, and many Africans have sent their people to go and study in Cuba. Their education is free from the bottom to the top. The children work on school farms to feed them. Toiletries are free. Uniform is free, shoes are free, and the young people who are working on the farms get a stipend. I wanted to say this because it is possible. A small country can do miracles, but you have to have, as people have said before, visionary leadership. So I leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Patricia, for that inspiring remarks, those inspiring remarks. And I think 3 things came to mind. Mr. Chernogay spoke about income inequality, and Jeffrey Sachs came to mind. You spoke about quality of education and also access to good education, and the Gambia demographic youth dividend comes to mind. And these are things that as a country we need to harness. So the development plan need to really critically look at these things, but equally the government's budget need to be in line with the aspirations of what we have planned. And if we want to plan to succeed, we need to execute for success. Lastly, we have Mr. Malik Khan, and Malik will give us his intervention. Then we will open the floor for discussions. Malik.
Good evening, or good afternoon. Hello? Can you hear me?
You can put it more towards your lips, maybe.
No, it's not working.
It's not?
No.
Sorry about that.
I'll use the mic. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for having me here. I wanted to personally thank Mr. Mustafa Njie for... I typically don't request to speak at events, but when I saw that this particular NDP topic was on there, I quickly went on LinkedIn and reached out to Mr. Njie. And Mr. Njie is the type of person that I noticed, I don't know him personally, this is probably my first time meeting in person ever, but he always picked up his LinkedIn when I reached out to him, and once he even gave me his phone number and said, call me, email me if you need anything from me. So I don't know if a lot of people here have heard of Innovate Gambia. It's an initiative we started a year ago. And even when we started that and wanted to do an event, the first person that I thought to reach out to was him. And then he was like, give me a call. I called him, I was driving, pick up my kids from school. And he's talking to me, I was like, wow, this gentleman is amazing. You know, he picked up his phone from a person that he doesn't know anything about. Unfortunately, he couldn't speak because he said he was traveling. But then we had Nyang Njie, Abdoulaye Toure, and all these people that came about. But the reason I really wanted to be here to really talk about the NDP and what we are trying to do through Innovate Gambia, we looked at 4 initiatives. One was to digitalize the country. Our first event was really, we wanted to understand why was it that the Gambia wasn't adapting technology as other nations. Because if we really want to get out of the rut, I really, really, really believe that technology is going to be the way that's going to pave that. Because if you want to develop a big economy, people think it's, increase productivity at the workplace, give them new systems. But that only accounts for about 14% of the growth. So where does the 86% comes from? It's efficiencies. What can take 100 people to do, with technology you can probably maybe even have 2 people do it. That's how all these big companies come about. The Facebooks and the Instagrams, all these billion-dollar corporations are using very little resources to get their things done. The NDP, when we looked at it, we wanted to compare it with Innovate Gambia to see what were some of the things that we were doing that were in there. And pretty much everything that we have in Innovate Gambia was in part of the NDP. And we're trying to digitalize the process of everything else. We took the NDP, the abridged version, which is 45 pages. There's two versions, 45 pages and the full version, which is 330 pages. So I actually made my whole staff, or the Gambians, read the NDP. They hated me during that time. But we wanted to understand what was it there that we can contribute. And this is where the human capital really comes about, which is the diaspora. My folks from the diaspora, I'm talking to you. Unfortunately, if you look at the $2.4 billion of that NDP, you know how much of that is dedicated to human capital? 8%. And here we are talking about education. But then our government thinks that 8% of the 2.4 should only go to developing our people, which is a big, big problem. It's all about education. We, my company, we are contributing up to $100,000 of our own funds from our pocket towards the NDP. Not that we're taking a check and writing it to the government and say, here you go, no. But we're taking our resources, because our time is our money, to really help them with some of the areas that they really need to really enhance. About half of that money is going into software that we're paying for. That's going to cost us actual cash that we have to bring out. About another half is human capital, our expertise, consulting, building. The website costs us about $5,000 to build it. But it allows you, every single person here, because whenever I ask the people here, how many of you have read your National Development Plan? Raise your hands if you have read the plan. And we're talking to these people about the NDP. And Chair Njie said this earlier. It's about sacrifice. What does the Gambian want? What is it that you want this country to be? All I see on Facebook is complaints. But no, we really need to have a serious conversation about this. Where do we want to take our nation? And this is the reason why I lifted and shifted my entire company. We still operate in the US. We have an office in Spain. In India, we still have our team there. But we're spending a lot of our resources here. We're acquiring an educational institution that's more on technology. Not because we want to get rich and charge people, but I want to create scholarship programs to put a lot of these youths to learn more about technology. We're building a tech hub that's going to cost us a lot of money. All these funds is from us. It's not from other people. And us, as these diasporans, as we call ourselves, we're the ones building the US. We're the ones building UK. Why aren't we building our own nation, folks? So I know we put a lot of blame and things on the government that they need to provide these things to us. You know, he talks about the government needs to look at enhancing the way people do business here. The government needs to enhance their business. So how can they really enhance other businesses? So they don't have time or resources to really do the things that we're asking them to do. They just don't. So it is up to us. These are our issues, guys. So I'm urging all of you guys that are building these top-notch nations that allows the people like Trump to call us, you know, the folks from the shithole countries. But it's the shithole people that are building them up. But Sharon rightfully said that, no, not everybody can come home. It just won't be sustainable. But what can you do remotely? What can you offer? I'm not asking these people for a dime. The $100,000 is the services. I'm like, if you're happy with our service, you want to continue to use us for other things, fantastic. But if you don't, you say, hey, Malik, thank you for the service and for helping us out. It's a win for me, just that alone. Because I can say I contributed towards that plan of the men being successful. And I want everybody in this room, whether you're in finance, you're in technology, or whatever it is, think of ways that you can look at that plan and see what is it that I can lend a hand. Not what can my country do for me, but what can you do for your country? So from an education standpoint, we're more looking at just sharing knowledge, doing a lot of networking events. I mean, what Tufts doing here, this is amazing. And guess who has to foot probably most of this bill? You probably paid for most of this stuff, didn't you? Absolutely. So for us, all of us, we have to come together. We have to really bring our A game and solve our issues. We're all Gambians. So we shouldn't expect that $2.4 billion that's being put on for the Gambia, that let's say 70% of that goes to external consultants. And then who's going to maintain the infrastructure once it's built? Because we never invested, because remember you put only 8% to train the people. Then we'll be this ever cycle of always depending on people. Guys, every February 18th we celebrate Independence Day. Why? Because we're not independent. Are we? We're not. So what are you celebrating? We go to the stadium, we march and all this stuff. We have to start building our own nation so we can be independent. And today, the level game platform is level for all of us, because we have the same access to the same resources that all these developed nations have. We have internet. It's good internet, it's just the infrastructure inside is not good, but we're trying to solve that, okay? But that needs to be number one priority. Energy, power for the energy, and infrastructure for connectivity. It's key, because now you can create and make people have access to be able to do more things. So as part of everything that I'm talking about here, it's all about what can we do together as a nation to be able to start solving some of our issues. And that is what we are doing. When we launched Innovate Gambia, we pledged to invest over $1 million of our own funds to creating all of our initiatives. And we weren't given any funds from the World Bank or from IMF or from this other organization. This is 100% us, because we wanted to start building that platform. What Tufts doing is the same thing, but we need other companies. When you come from the airport, you come and you see AfriCell, but I don't see AfriCell doing events like this. But then we all consume their stuff. There's other companies that are doing well in the Gambia that need to do the same thing. So I want to work with other organizations like Africa Tough Global to how can we recruit other nations to offer, other companies in this country that are doing well, that are consuming a lot of our, we're consuming their services, but they're making a lot of money and taking it offshore. Why? So we need to come together as companies, as individuals, and really start building our nation, because Gambia will go forward. And we're not going to depend on people to always keep doing that for us. And so, So I appreciate the platform. I appreciate what Tufts doing. I mean, this is amazing. When I walked in, I was like, I've been to other events, and you're like, so I've been to a lot of conferences. I attend a lot of conferences, so I've seen the standards. And, you did a phenomenal job. You're setting the bar high, because I have my other event coming. I was like, shit, man, now I have to raise my income level. So good job. Thank you very much for the platform, and we appreciate everybody here.
Thank you, Malik. Always A+ delivery. And what you spoke about, 8% of the total NDP going towards education training, says a lot. We are in the age of technology, and productivity is a way to make sure profits are maximized. And Lester Toro of MIT said the same in the past, that companies and countries that want to go to the next level need to up their efficiency game. And therefore, Gambia needs to do that, but starting with putting monies where efficiency will be recorded positively, and that is training and education. Moving forward, we'll open the floor for questions, and we want thought-provoking questions, not statements. We're not looking for statements. We want questions. We want an interactive session, but we want you to provoke the panelists that are up here. So we'll start from this side, going this way. Can we have someone take a mic around this section first? Just raise hands if anyone wants to ask a question from that end. Is there any brave soul? If not, I'll go to this section.
There's one right here.
No. Here first.
Okay.
Systematic. And okay. Next. Gentleman, Mr. Jain. You can also identify yourself, please.
My name is Musa John. Sure.
Thank you.
My name is Musa John. I